It was the late 1970s during the Cold War days. A U.S. Air Force C-130 Hercules plane left from Clark Air Base on a regular flight across the Pacific Ocean. 7 men were on board. Nothing special, just spare parts. Another long trip over the ocean. But somewhere past the halfway point, the sky turned dark black. The compass started spinning and the radio stopped working right. The fuel got low. The pilot saw a strip of land that wasn't on any map. We landed the plane on that island. We thought it meant we would survive, but we were completely wrong. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. I flew cargo planes for a living. That is what we called it. Low and slow, carrying boxes and people, dropping mail and bombs, whatever the officers put on the list and signed with a smile. I was a flight engineer on a Hercules plane out of Clark. My patch read 374th Tactical Airlift Wing. The plane smelled like old oil and sweat, and a special fluid you never fully washed out. The tail number was 65078, but we said it like a prayer. 65, our old grumpy mule. I was not the best at anything. Not the worst either. I was good at keeping a plane alive on little sleep, and good at swearing at instruments until they worked. It was the late 1970s. The Cold War felt like a low fever you got used to. We carried boxes between the Philippines and other places east and north and way out where the Pacific Ocean turns black. Move the supplies. Keep on schedule. Drink bad coffee. Pretend nothing out there could reach back and hurt us. The crew was 7 people on that trip. Captain Rohr had a voice like rocks and a mustache that didn't obey gravity. The co-pilot was a new guy fresh from training named Lam, eager with too many teeth when he smiled. The navigator was a quiet major called Yates who smelled like pipe tobacco even with the no smoking signs. The crew chief was Steve, an Oklahoma farm boy who treated the plane like a stubborn cow. 2 loadmasters, McGill and Ortiz, could both stack boxes in their sleep and had done it more than once. We took off from Clark in the morning. The sky was a pale bruise color. The heat came on strong. Our cargo was boring. It was always the boring loads that got you. Boxes of spare parts, bags of mail, a few green duffel bags with their straps taped shut. The list had a funny note on the last box, handwritten initials I didn't know. I thought about asking. I didn't. We had a long flight out toward a mid-Pacific fuel stop, then on to somewhere that wouldn't put a stamp in your passport. We did the normal talking. Who had guard duty last night? Who lost money to the same crusty sergeant in the day room? Who was dumb enough to date the bartender off base? Captain Rohr tuned the engines like a church organist. I watched the needles, oil temperature, fuel flow. The plane shivered and settled into that steady old hum that crawls under your skin and makes a home there. We ran checklists. We said the words. I looked out at the ocean. I always did. It had a way of looking back like it knew something you didn't. But that's just a tired man with too much coffee talking. The day was fine. Blue water, scattered clouds, a big empty nothing below, and a radio that hissed like an angry cat and then went quiet. We were flying a straight line across nowhere. You don't think about hours when the world is just water. You think about the next fuel stop. You think about the next day. You keep your mind where your hands are. You don't borrow trouble. I remember the maintenance chief telling me the night before, chin full of scars. Watch the stars when you get far out. Sometimes they move wrong out there. He said it like a joke or not. I said he was full of it. He laughed. We clinked tin mugs with coffee black as motor oil, and that was that. So we flew. We were just another plane in the stack. And if you want the truth, I loved it. The noise, the crew, the way a Hercules shrugs off weather like a bull. The way we were small but not helpless. That's the trick, feeling small and strapped in and fine anyway. The hours passed. We rode the numbers. We took our turns at the bottle that said water but tasted like plastic. Ortiz passed me a chunk of jerky that might have been beef or might have been a shoe. I chewed it anyway. The world below kept being water. The world inside the plane kept being metal and sweat and noise, the kind that gets into your bones and makes a kind of music. Normal. Boring. The first thing wrong was the compass. The magnetic one. The simple iron circle that ignores lies. It started to shake, not big, not dramatic, just a nervous little twitch like it had the chills. Yates tapped it. I saw him do it and pretend he hadn't. He checked the navigation system and grunted. "We've got drift," he said. "Nothing crazy, just a little." Captain said, "Hold what you got." Butterbar said, "Yes, sir," with too much bounce. We were in and out of thin lines of cloud. The ocean below shifted from blue to iron gray and back like a mood. The radio got fussy. Not dead, just not eager. Stations we should have heard clearly came in weak. Voices clipped. Some stepping on each other like two shows on the same dial. It sounded like we had ghosts down there talking in a tin can. I fiddled with the panel and got a little more power. Didn't like the feel of that either. Then we saw storms where the weather map said none. The line went purple under us, then ripped green again like nothing had happened. Yates kept talking to the horizon like it owed him money. "We're a few degrees right of plan. Fixing course now," he wrote on his clipboard. He didn't like to be wrong. He didn't like when the world moved under him like a rug. The clouds stacked on themselves like they were keeping a secret. Pretty, if you weren't trying to drag a big 4-engine box through it. We weren't in a storm, not yet. But the sky had that fine taste before a punch. The air got bumpy. The plane jostled like a tired horse. Roar worked the throttles, smoothed her out. He muttered old hymns to the Hercules. He knew how to make her feel safe. Butterbar said he saw a flash off the water. I looked and saw only slick slate, no ships, no sun glare, nothing. He shrugged it off. I shrugged it off. Yates didn't shrug it off. He made a note. He made a lot of notes once the compass twitch started. He checked time with the HF radio, got a sync from a station that sounded like someone whispering under a blanket. Then he frowned. "We're slipping a few seconds," he said. "Say again?" Roar kept his voice flat, which meant he wasn't flat inside. "Time sync from base is behind us. Just a hair. Seconds, it shouldn't be like that." "HF is lousy today," I said. "Storms pushing signals around." "Sure," Yates said, but he didn't sound sure. Cloud tops grew taller. The ocean below had white scratches like someone raked a comb through it. "We got a wind shift we didn't ask for." The navigation system complained. The compass took another little dance. Drift got worse. "I want to fix off anything with a pulse," Roar said. "Beacon boat, I don't care. I want a number to hold." We got a number. It didn't match the other number. We picked the one that felt less wrong and turned toward it. I watched fuel like it mattered more than God. "It does sometimes." Ortiz came forward and leaned in. "You smell that?" "What?" "Wet dirt." We were over nothing but water. He smelled wet dirt. I smelled wet dirt. Then it was gone. He scratched his neck and went back to his boxes. The sky got dark ahead. Not night, not rain, just dark. A bruise on the world. You would steer around it if you could. We didn't have room for that game. Fuel said this was the road we had, and that was that. We stepped into the bruise. The sky closed. The dials got sticky. The radio sounded like it was under a mile of water. The plane kept flying because that's what she was built to do, but it felt like flying down a long hallway toward a door that might not be there when you got there. I put my hand on the panel, just rested it there, and felt a buzz I don't have a good word for, like a tin can with bees trapped inside. I looked at Roar, he looked at me. Neither of us said anything we believed. The ocean smelled closer. The air got cold, then warm, then something in between, like the world couldn't decide on one story. The compass did another shake. Yates hissed, "Son of a—" "We're getting pulled," Roar said. "By what?" I said. "By the ocean," he said, and tried to make it a joke. It wasn't funny. Then a thin band of land popped up on the windshield. Black and sharp and wrong where no land should be. Cliff faces bit out of the water. Green jungle piled up behind them. A scored line along one low shoulder like something old and flat ran through it once. Roar said very calmly, "Well, there's our ditch." We came off the bruise and onto a strip of sky that might have seen a sun once. The horizon yanked itself into place. The land came at us sideways and fast. Yates threw directions at Roar like rocks. "Left 2. Left 2 more. Drop altitude now." Butterbar's hand shook hard enough to make the controls dance. Roar steadied him with a look. "We're going to put her in that cut," he said. "Shove the nose down, ride it in. Gear down on my call." Steve, the crew chief, was already unstrapping, grabbing a flashlight. That didn't help anything. He yelled down the tube for the loadmasters to strap in and keep their teeth in their heads. I pulled the quick systems check and lied to myself about how okay we were. Fuel red, not enough to go shopping. Engines felt hot. One was running rough. The radio was chewing through static like gristle and spitting back curses. The cut looked like a runway that got into a fight and lost. It was a straight scar through the green. Dark dirt, bits of broken plank, edges covered with roots. In the middle distance, something silver lay in vines. Old, curved. It had the narrow neck of a fighter from a war none of us had fought. A zero, I thought, like a memory from a book. That didn't help anything. Roar dropped the gear. It thunked into place like slamming doors. We came in low over black sand that stuck like ash. Past palm trees that shouldn't have been that still. The air was heavy, like we were diving into syrup. Roar held us off just long enough to pretend we landed on purpose. We hit the dirt. The plane bounced like a bull, then grabbed the scar and didn't let go. The nose tire kicked a rotted plank halfway to the trees. I swear I heard the wood complain in a language not spoken by wood. We hammered along. I smelled hot brakes and old ghosts. The rough ground was bad enough to make the wing tanks groan. I called out airspeed. I called out distance. I called anything to make it feel like we had a say. Roar brought the throttles up, down, up again. We tracked straight. We didn't veer into the green teeth on either side. The plane threw her weight around and then surrendered like she remembered being a truck once. We coasted to a stop with propellers winding down on a strip no map had agreed to exist. Everybody in the back breathed out at once. Steve said, "Well, that sucked." Which was brave talk and not wrong. Engines spooled quiet. The jungle didn't start chirping. That sat wrong right away. No birds, no insects, no little lizards making click-talk in the leaves. Just wind hitting the cliffs and getting tired. Ocean hissed somewhere out of sight. That was it, we did the business. Systems safe, fuel crossfeeds closed, hydraulics bled down, fire bottles armed just in case. We cracked the side door. Hot air rolled in, damp and weird, Ortiz said. I still smell wet dirt. And we all did now that the plane wasn't breathing loud. We're not leaving her, Steve said, as if anyone had suggested it. Nobody's leaving anything, Roar said. We need a look. We need water. We need a radio that plays nice. We need that strip to live long enough for someone to come get us when we find a way to make them want to. Yates stuck his head out under the wing and came back with a look. That's a zero out there, he said. Or a cousin of one. Old war junk, Ortiz said. Plenty of islands ate planes. Yeah, Yates said. But that one out there has paint on it like it dried last week. We went slow. We didn't like the silence. We tiptoed in boots anyway. The jungle had the shine of a place where it always rains, but the leaves were too still. The light was wrong. You know how under jungle canopy everything goes green-black and little bugs throw a party in your ears? None of that. The air had the taste of metal, like thunder that forgot to clap. The wreck lay in vines, long wings shrugged up like shoulders. The skin was dull aluminum, not the flaky brown scabs you get when time chews. Kanji ghosted the fuselage in brushwork strokes. I ran a finger over it. The paint didn't flake under my nail. It should have. It felt like it had been put there last week and then left in the sun to think about its sins. Ortiz popped an inspection panel with a grin like a kid at a junkyard. He reached in and pulled out a cartridge. You seen this? He said, eyes big, the brass was bright. Not polished, just not 70 years old. He touched it to his tongue. No green taste, he said. Put it back, Steve said, way too fast. We moved along the cut and found the bunker line half swallowed in green. Concrete poured thick and ugly, chipped like teeth. Japanese characters stenciled above a door. Banana spiders the size of my hand on the outside. None of them moved. Not one. I hate spiders. They should have made me hate them more by moving. Their stillness was worse. We ducked in. The air got cold in there. A cellar cold. Flashlights threw white cones across steel cans on shelves. Big kanji labels. Date stamped 1944. Ortiz laughed at that. Yeah, sure. Fresh rations from the war. He popped one open with a P-38 because men like him carry them everywhere. Thick stew smell rolled out. It smelled like something you could eat. It should have smelled like rot. Ortiz put a pinky in and tasted. He frowned. That's edible, he said. Salty as hell, but not bad. We found a clock on the wall above a phone that led nowhere. Big round face. Hand stuck. It read 0217. The second hand had stuttered and given up between ticks. I reached to adjust it out of habit. The glass was cold. When I put my palm flat on the face, I felt that tin can bee buzz again. and I pulled my hand away like it bit me. Time check, Yates said to himself. He looked at his wrist. He frowned. That's not right, he tapped. He shook it. The second hand drifted backward a little, then forward, then stopped. Butterbar came back with his face white. There's a smoke column on the south ridge, he said. I can see it across the cut. We went out and looked. There it was. Thin gray snake of it drifting up lazy. Human smoke, cook fire, or someone burning damp brush. We felt stupid for feeling relief. Somebody out here meant a radio, a map, a reason. We geared up to move. Water, pistols, a rifle we kept zipped in a bag for long trips we never admitted we had. I grabbed a radio because I'm a slow learner. We headed for the ridge. The smoke was a line you could follow like a finger on a page. We moved through green that didn't creak enough. Now and then I put my palm on a tree to steady myself and felt that buzz. Like the clock had in the bunker, Ortiz said, tired of keeping it secret. I hate this. We all did. We broke the tree line at the ridge and stepped onto black rock. The smoke was gone. Not blown off, not moved. Gone like it had been erased. My throat dried out in one breath. The air went warm, cold, warm again like it was cycling through me. Yates pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm going to be sick, he said. He wasn't the only one. Back at the plane, the shade under the wing felt like the only church left in the world. We huddled there like kids. We told ourselves lies about radios and weather. That was our first disturbance, we told each other later, but it was more than that. The island was telling us how it wanted to play. We were slow to hear it. We got to work because that's what hands do when the head doesn't like what it knows. Antenna up on a makeshift pole. HF radio got spread out like a patient. Yates did a time check with Base and made a face like he bit an unripe fruit. Base says it's been 8 minutes since our last check, he said. We've been on the ground over an hour. Storm bouncing the signal, I said. The lie had splinters now. It still fit in the mouth. We called for help. We got voices back that had the wrong pitch like they were played on a broken tape. Say again, we kept saying. Say again. The more we asked, the less real the voices became. Finally, a clean voice cut through. It named our call sign like a friend we hadn't seen. We show you in the soup, it said. Say your position in degrees and minutes. We did. There was a pause. Say again, it said, but softer. We have nothing there. That's water. The compass at my elbow went backward a hair, then forward, then stopped. I stared at it until my eyes watered. I checked the others. The same dance. The clock on the panel ticked forward 1 second and then froze at 02:17. It hadn't said 02:17 before. It did now. I wasn't crazy about that. Co-pilot Lom had a cut on his forearm from the landing. Nothing big. He had dabbed it with a rag and taped it. The rag stuck, but the blood under it stayed bright, no scab. It feels weird, he said. Like it wants to keep bleeding but doesn't know how. He smiled like a kid who just learned to shave. I wanted to shake him. Sit down, I said. Drink water. We took photos because that's what you do when you think nobody will believe you. Ortiz walked the bunker with a cheap camera and snapped frames of clocks and cans and the way vines wrapped around steel like cloth. He took a shot of the zero. He took one of the smoke we thought we saw. He took a picture of Yates holding the radio handset like it was a live snake. The camera made all the right little clicks. It might as well have been eating our memories for later. The jungle kept not making noise. Every now and then a breeze rattled leaves and then regretted it. I kept thinking of how basses sound, even at night. Dogs, a generator humming, somebody kicking a can. This island sounded like a hallway between rooms nobody lived in. We felt watched. I don't mean by animals. I mean like standing in a church alone and knowing the church is not empty, and wishing it was just a person behind you and not what it actually is. The hair on my arm stood up. I told myself it was humidity. It wasn't. We heard gunfire at noon, short and sharp down the cut. We ducked like idiots under a wing that wouldn't stop a bullet. Then we laughed and called ourselves names because laughter is a tool. We went to see. Brass lay in the dirt, still warm, when Steve picked one up and hissed, Jesus. The cartridge was the wrong kind for anything we carried. It looked old, not corroded, not fresh, something in between. It had kanji stamped on the base. We listened. No voices, no footsteps, no birds flushing out of trees, which is what happens after shooting. None of that. Just the ocean pretending not to laugh. Someone's screwing with us, Ortiz said. Locals, pirates, whoever. They'll show up with machetes and cheesy smiles any minute. Keep saying that, Yates said. Maybe it'll be true. We found footprints near the bunker mouth, barefoot, narrow, the step of men used to going light. The prints layered on each other like a bad photocopy. It looked like the same patrol walked, there over itself again and again until the dirt forgot which was first. We followed them until they faded on rock that looked wet and wasn't. We followed the sound of a diesel engine for a minute until we figured out it had no source. That afternoon, a jet went overhead, not like ours. Higher, fast, sharp sound that hit the cliff and rolled down into our bones. I looked up and saw nothing but a gray ceiling. We called it in. We ran the tape backward in our heads later. Base said, "No aircraft in your quarter of the sky." "I don't care," I said. I heard it. Butterbar did too. He started to talk about it and then stopped because his voice shook. Near evening, the light slanted wrong. Shadows too long for the hour, angled like they were mailed from somewhere else. Time got slippery around our ankles. We kept checking our watches like drunks checking for their keys. Most of them froze at 02:17 at some point and then refused to be bullied into anything else. My stomach forgot to ask for food. When I forced myself to eat, everything tasted like cardboard. When I tried not to eat, my hands shook like I needed sugar. No rules, only quirks. We took turns keeping watch anyway, as if there were rules. We sat under the wing with rifles across our knees like we were somewhere they made sense. The night sat down like a giant, not caring that we wanted it to be kind. The stars came out in more than one place at once. That's the best way I can put it. Constellations I knew tried out new positions, like someone shook the sky and just let it settle how it wanted. I told myself I was too tired to see right. Night vision flickered. That was normal sometimes. But the flicker had a rhythm like a heartbeat that wasn't ours. I took the goggles off and stared at the dark until my eyes made fireflies where there were none. I don't know when we fell asleep. We did, because bodies make that call even when heads don't. We woke to the smell of coffee. That was impossible. Nobody had lit anything. The smell walked right through camp and kept going. We watched it leave. We didn't say anything worth keeping. Morning came at the wrong hour. Our watches said it was still before dawn. The sky said noon. The plane's panel clock still said 02:17. Fresh dew clung to the wing like sweat. Steve cussed and wiped her down like he could rub the wrong off. "We're not dying here," he said. And then quieter. "Not like this." We went back into the bunker with a plan to steal parts, steal anything, flex the radio into good behavior. The bunker didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. Cans stacked neat, blankets folded, a chessboard set mid-game with pieces carved like little iron men. I touched a pawn. It felt warm. That gave me the shakes. I checked a locker and found a photograph of men in uniforms, not ours. Brave faces, caps at angles, writing on the back in neat lines of kanji. The ink looked wet. I rubbed it with my thumb and it didn't smear. It should have looked old. It looked now. We heard boots, not ours. Slap of leather on concrete. We turned as one. They were there and not. 5 men in old field uniforms, rifles with long snouts, bayonets on their belts, eyes flat with a kind of tired pride I've seen in every army. They walked in a line past us without looking like we were smoke. Or they were. The lead man paused at the clock on the wall, glanced at it, scowled, and kept moving. We didn't breathe. We did that thing you do, holding so still your bones ache like they'll crack, Ortiz whispered. Holy Mary. And the nearest soldier's head twitched like he heard something through a wall. Then they were gone. Not vanished, just moved down a hall that didn't exist. And when we stepped after them, all we found was a blank concrete wall. On the floor where the last one stepped, a fresh boot print. On a shelf to the right, a helmet that hadn't been there a blink ago. The strap was frayed where it had rubbed a man's neck. I touched it and felt the bee buzz, and my fingertips went numb. That clock, Yates said hoarsely. Everything points at that clock. It points at 2:17, I said. I hated the sound of those words in my mouth. We should try a thing, he said. He had that look pilots get when they decide they're wrong enough to be brave. Watch this. He stood by the clock and stared at its stuck hands. If this place is glued at a moment, he said, maybe it treats now like a circle. He raised his hand. We yelled at him. He took the minute hand between finger and thumb and turned it one tick forward. The bunker heaved. That's the only word for it. Concrete groaned like a ship in ice. The air went cold enough to hurt. My eyes watered. The lights that weren't lights in the hall flickered. For a blink, the bunker was full. Not of us, but of a dozen men in old uniforms shouting in a language I don't speak, while the ground shook like it had been hit. A shell blast clapped far away or right next to my teeth, then it all slotted back. The clock's hand slid back to 02:17 like rubber. "Don't do that again," Steve said through his teeth. "Okay," Yates said, which wasn't a promise. We went back to honest work. Radio guts, wires, antennas strung like spiderwebs out of the bunker mouth. We got a clean link for 30 seconds. In that 30 seconds, we gave a position nobody recognized and described an island nobody had a name for. The voice on the other end said our signal was faint but clear. He asked what time it was. 4 of us looked at our wrists and said a number that didn't match. The voice read the time back to us. It was behind us by hours that should have belonged to yesterday. That's when Lam started bleeding again. He wasn't doing anything. He was drinking water and trying not to cry like a kid because all his training had fallen through his fingers like sand. The rag on his forearm went dark in a second and he swore. We unwrapped it. The cut was the same size as yesterday. Bright blood pulled like someone forgot the clotting step in the design. I started pressure, then stopped, then started again because my head told my hand something was off. It felt like pressing on a bruise that refused to admit it. We burned a piece of cloth and pressed that on. He yelped. The wound didn't scab, but the bleeding slowed because we told it to. He smiled again the way kids do when you say it's fine and they know you're lying but want to believe you. "Time doesn't move right here," Yates said, holding his temples with 2 fingers as if he could steady the math. "It sticks, then jumps. The clocks show the stop. The smoke shows the jump. I think the island is a knot. Maybe it's tangled up in its own past." "That doesn't help me fly us off," Roar said, but his voice had some respect in it, like he'd seen men get a plane home on worse ideas. Then the shooting started again, very near. We ran to the cut like idiots again. On the far end, figures moved fast, the old uniforms the way they kept low to the ground. They weren't looking at us. They were looking at someone else you couldn't see. One of them pitched forward like someone kicked his feet out. His rifle clattered. He got up again slow, the wrong way, like time backed him up and hit play again and said, "No, try it like this." We didn't fire. We didn't even raise our rifles. It felt like bringing a knife to a painting. Then a round snapped off a rock near my foot and I moved because the part of your body that likes living doesn't care about weird stuff. Steve grabbed my collar. "Back," he said. Back under the wing, we retreated to our church. We looked at each other like men in stories do. The kind where you know who dies next and why. Nobody said that out loud because some talk you don't make real that way. Ortiz said we should go to the beach. "What for?" I said. "Because it's not the jungle." That was logic I could sit with for 10 minutes. We took a path that felt like it had been a road once. Black sand beach, lava rocks like broken glass, ocean rolling and soft like it didn't care we were screwed. On the tide line, a mess of flotsam, old rope, bits of wood, a bottle with a note, which is a thing I thought only happened in stories for kids. I picked it up anyway. The glass had bubbles in it from old ways of making. The cork crumbled. The note was in Japanese. The date at the bottom read 1944. The ink looked fresh. I put it back in the bottle and set it down like you put a baby you don't love in a crib. The horizon did a trick. A smudge that might have been a ship. Then nothing. Then a smudge again. It made me dizzy. "Can we leave it?" Ortiz said. "Just leave the island. Walk out into the water and keep going and leave it behind like a bad bar fight." "You'll drown," Yates said. "Better than this," Ortiz said. He didn't mean it. We went back to work. The smarter you are, the more work you do when the world stops making sense, because it keeps your hands from hitting your own face. We got the radio stable enough to send a steady ping on a frequency someone would hear if they were bored and loved us. We kept the plane ready. Fuel we had could keep the APU humming. Batteries were good. Hydraulics were topped. Steve polished her like a priest. That night we heard men singing, not us. Not English, a marching song or a barracks chant. It echoed down the strip and out over the water. It made me cry without my permission. I didn't know why. It sounded like men who expected to die and wanted their last song to belong to their brothers. We lost Ortiz in the morning and got him back at sunset, and he wasn't the same. That's how fast the island changed the rules. He said he was going to the bunker for water. He was whistling a tune he always whistled because it annoyed Yates. He rounded the wingtip and the green took him without a sound. We were 3 steps behind. We reached the bunker mouth and it wasn't there. We stared at concrete that hadn't been there the day before and was now blank, like a wall put up to hide a room. We turned in a circle with guns up and curses out. And there was no Ortiz, no boot prints, no annoyed whistling. Just a sweet stink in the air like fruit that turned. Back to the wing. Roar said, "We anchor here. We don't chase ghosts in green. We didn't anchor. We scattered like chickens and called his name and came back because the green is big and we are not." The ocean laughed at us again. Hours passed. Our watches argued about how many. The sun started down and then changed its mind. It hung on a branch of cloud like a red coin, then fell behind the ridge like someone lost their grip. Ortiz walked into camp from the side. None of us were watching. He was carrying a can of rations with 1944 stamped on it, and he had a look on his face like he'd just been told a joke in a language he used to know when he was small. "We were playing cards," he said. "Who?" Steve said. "The guys in the bunker," Ortiz said. We all said things at once. He shook his head. "No, not like that. I saw them and they saw me, but they didn't see me. I sat with them. They didn't move around me. Time pulled. I picked up a card and it was blank. I put it down and it had a king of hearts on it. Then the clock struck 02:17. "It doesn't strike," I said. "It did," he said, not looking at me. It rang like a church bell and everyone stood up at once. I stood with them and none of us knew why. "Your face," Lam said. You have... Ortiz wiped at his forehead. His hand came away with soot. There was a black smear over one eye like someone had slapped him with ash. He rubbed it harder. "It didn't go. That's new," he said. He didn't sound interested. That scared me more than if he had screamed. We ate because men do that when they can't solve their own stories. The jerky tasted like nothing. The can of stew he brought back tasted too much like something. I spit mine into the sand and told myself it was because of salt, not fear. After the sun made up its mind and left, we set a perimeter like a bunch of morons playing army on an island that played a different game. The night kept going and didn't. The stars not only moved, they flickered in and out like someone throwing a switch. I felt eyes, not in the bushes, above, below, inside my skull. Not like a god, like a machine that wants to count you. The singing came back closer. Then we heard the chopping thud of a helicopter you could feel in your ribs. The good heavy kind. Jolly green. I stood so fast my knee cracked. "Here!" I yelled. "Here!" The others yelled with me. A beam of light tore the sky like a zipper. It passed over us and didn't stop. It went on into the night in a direction that wasn't possible. The beam bent. That shouldn't happen. It did. The sound of the rotors went away like someone turned down a dial. We stood, with our mouths open, and watched the beam of a thing that might save you bend like a stick and vanish into a night that had no business eating light. That's when Steve started laughing. Not funny laughing. The kind you do when your mind goes to a room with locked doors. He laughed until he coughed and then he said, "I'm fine," and didn't stop looking at nothing. We pulled him back under the wing and sat on our cases of spare parts like kings on thrones made of junk. Lam's bandage was dry now. His cut looked newer than it had any right to. His beard should have had a day's growth. It didn't, mine didn't either. We rubbed our chins like idiots and grinned at each other and nobody said the obvious. We stared at the photographs Ortiz had taken. The first few came out clean. The plane under the wing, the zero in vines, the clock. Then the pictures got faint blank except for shadows that didn't belong to us. In one you could see 5 shapes in the bunker where we stood. Not in our places, in theirs. One man had his hand on the clock and it wasn't Yates. I tore that one in half and threw it into the sand. The pieces stuck to my shoe. I kicked them off like a dog with burrs. Around midnight, the strip went bright. Floodlights none of us had lit. Men ran across it in old helmets with nets shouting. A siren howled. We saw a plane come in from the sea. Low, belly down, wheels up, sparks throwing in a hard trail behind it. It slid past us on a stripe of years and vanished into trees that weren't there. We felt the heat of it on our faces. We touched our cheeks and winced like we'd sat too close to a fire. There was no fire, we didn't look at each other. The ocean hissed and brought in a wave with something in it, a crate. We dragged it out. It had U.S. markings from a war we only inherited. We pried it open with the bar. Inside were bandages, morphine in bottles with glass stoppers, a little book with instructions printed crooked. The bandages were white like snow. The morphine was clear as rain. None of it should have been that way. We closed the crate and pushed it back into the sea. At some point, the island made a sound I still hear sometimes when I'm too tired to fight it. A low hum that's not in your ears but in your teeth. A pressure like when you dive deep and your head asks questions your lungs can't answer. It climbed enough to make me cry again for reasons I don't want to treat like poetry. Then it dropped, and with it something in my chest like a chain went slack. I said to the others, "We need to get off this thing." No one argued. We made a plan that wasn't a plan but felt like one. We would run the radio hot and dirty for as long as it would take for someone to triangulate our sorry butts. We would keep the plane lit and friendly. We would mark the strip with anything that burned straight. We would fire flares. We would not follow smoke that led nowhere. We would not touch clocks. We would not eat stew that dated before our parents were dancing in the dark. We set to it. I coaxed the radio until it gave me more than angry static. We held a fix on a frequency that made sense. We sent our call sign and a weird prayer I didn't know I believed. Any friendly listening? This is a Hercules in distress on an uncharted island at coordinates we have read 3 times. We need a vector. We need a rescue bird. We need a ship. We need a miracle. A voice came back clear as your mother. "We hear you," it said. "Hold that transmit. Keep talking. We're painting you. Stand by." I fell in love with a man I would never meet. We kept talking. We said names and numbers and the words you say when you want to be found. We fired a flare. The red went up. It left a line like a scratch in a painting that stayed after. It hung too long. The shade under the wing trembled with heat that didn't arrive. The flare came down in a way I don't have words for. It fell and never hit the ground. Then did again. Then the island got mad. The singing came back and it wasn't in the trees. It was in us. We felt the song using our bones as a drum. The bunker lights we hadn't turned on popped alive. Clocks that couldn't tick did. They ticked and ticked until they only said one thing. 0217. The ground shook like a dog with water in its coat. I heard engines, old and new, layered like a bad harmony. Propellers and jets and something like chains. Men came out of the trees. Not ours, not theirs. Some in uniforms I knew. Some in clothes I knew my grandfather might have pointed at. They didn't look at us. They moved through us like we were fog. One passed right through Lam. He screamed and folded. He wasn't dead. He just got not here for a second. When he came back, his eyes were wrong. Not blind, just like he was looking at a world half a step to the left. We backed up against the plane like a wall. Steve had a wrench like a club. McGill had a rifle. He didn't point at anything because the island made a joke out of pointing. Yates had his hand on the panel clock like he could hold the tide. I had the radio in my lap and a voice in my ear telling me to breathe. A man in an old officer's cap stepped up onto the strip, looked at the sky, and drew a sword. That should have been ridiculous. It wasn't. He shouted a command. The men around him cheered and ran right through us. Cold went through my guts like I was a window left open in winter. I gagged. I tasted smoke and something sweet and rotten. 2 minutes, the voice in my ear said. Hold your transmit. We have a bearing. Don't move. I wanted to laugh at that. Don't move. Sure. We stood frozen while ghosts or men or both fought a battle in a language I didn't speak on a runway that hadn't been here yesterday and wouldn't be tomorrow. Bullets slapped dirt at our boots. A shell whined and didn't land and then did somewhere. That was also here. The zero in the vines shrieked like aluminum being folded by God. The clock in the bunker struck with no bell and winked its dead hands at us like a joke. You don't tell in polite company, Roar said very evenly. When they get here, we go. We don't think, we don't pack. We get on whatever they send and we take our sins with us. Then the ocean coughed and a black shape shouldered up beyond the reef. A ship not old, not new, maybe ours. It was the wrong distance. Close and far. I blinked and it was smaller or bigger. A light shot from its bow like a finger pointing at us. The voice in my ear said, "We have you. We have you, hold." You ever try to hold when the world is unbuttoning itself? We did, and the island did its best to unmake our standing still. It brought a smell of cinnamon like my grandmother's kitchen. It brought a scream like a rabbit in a snare and then made it a child. It brought the touch of a hand on the back of my neck that felt like the day before I enlisted when a girl I never married told me to stay. The island wasn't a place. It was a set of choices you didn't make and the memory of making them anyway. It wanted you to believe it. It almost had me. Then a light fell out of the sky on a rope. A real one. This one didn't bend. It didn't vanish into a curve. It burned straight as a line of orders you can't argue. Rotor wash hit us like rain. Hot, clean air. Men in helmets leaned out and shouted over the thump. Their mouths matched their words. Their eyes were new, move. Roar shouted like we were recruits. We moved. We grabbed Lom and his bandage that wouldn't commit to healing, and we sprinted across a ground that tried to be more than one thing. We slid on our butts into the basket. Hands pulled us in. The helicopter bucked like a wild horse and heaved us up. The rope burned through time and into right now. Something tugged. The island didn't want to let go. We lifted. The plane got small. Our wing church looked like a toy. The bunker mouth gaped like a tooth pulled wrong. Men in old uniforms looked up and didn't see us. The clock said 0217. It said it as the rotors hammered the air into shape. Then the island blurred. The water turned to static. The cliffs leaned in like they wanted to whisper. The helicopter climbed anyway. The pilot swore through his teeth. "You boys picked the worst place," he said, like we'd done it for fun. I looked at his sleeve. The patch was a unit I knew, but not like that. Colors a hair different. Details wrong in ways I only understood when they kept me awake years later. I didn't say that then. I clung to a strap and tried not to throw up into my lap. We came up above clouds, and then the clouds were gone. And then we were over black water with nothing in any direction, and the ship that had been there was not. The pilot talked to a voice on a net I couldn't hear. He kept glancing at a clock that didn't say 2:17. I wanted to kiss it. We flew long or short. Time on the helicopter didn't act like a joke. It acted like time. We landed on a deck that moved in a way a deck should. Men ran. A corpseman pulled Lom away by the good arm and didn't look confused when his cut looked new and old. He did the work you learn from other men and from books. He swabbed. He stitched. The blood listened to him. It obeyed. They put blankets over us. Even though the air was thick and warm, they gave us water that tasted like a hose and a bar of soap and a cup of something sweet. I cried in mine. I didn't apologize. The taste of sweetness broke something I'd been holding on to so tight. My hands forgot how to open. The pilot came by later and put his hand on the rail and said, "We got you off an island that wasn't there when we went around again." That's just between us. We nodded like we understood. We didn't. We understood the kind of secret that leaves a mark without leaving a scar. That part I remember clean. Back at Clark, they debriefed us. Questions neat. Answers messy. Everything stamped classified. Medical poked. Said we should have stubble. We didn't. Watches stuck at 0217. Maintenance tore into the plane, found black sand and wiring looms. Salt where no water touched. A Japanese shell casing stamped 1944 under the floor. Still warm when they pulled it out. Nobody wanted to sign that form. The crew scattered. Some called it stress. Some tried to solve it. Most shut up me. I kept flying. Didn't trust the ground after that. Every so often I wake up at 0217. No clock in the room. I still know. Sometimes I smell wet dirt over blue water. Sometimes I hear boots walking past when I'm alone. We didn't win. We just got out. That's all. So that's the end of our video. If you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free. And if you want more terrifying encounters like this one, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. See you soon.